Hello, I'm Andrés Duany, and I am a partner in DPZ CoDesign. And as you may know, I've been delivering an awful lot of lectures all my life. And the lectures are long, and then there's not enough time for questions. So we have a new format here in which there's no lecture at all, and we just go straight to the questions. So we had a bunch of fairly knowledgeable people, sometimes too knowledgeable. There are a lot of trick questions in here. And what we've arranged is for me to go straight to the questions and answer them instead of waiting till the end of the lecture. And it's pretty nice. Now, some of them you'll see they're just too embarrassing or too difficult for a short form, and I put them in the back. So I'm avoiding some of the questions, but most of them are pretty good. Which is your favorite city and why? Now, that is a classic question, and I don't think I would have known which was my favorite city unless I had been asked that, a few years ago. And I realized that it was clearly Charleston, South Carolina, but then I had to figure out why, because there are so many really very good cities. And this is an explanation I came up with 2 decades ago, and it still holds. Cities consist of a public realm, the streets and the squares and the parks, and a private realm, which is the houses, the private lot and the private house. And when you go to a city like Paris, which is everybody's favorite, it has an exceptional public realm. The avenues are great, the parks are great, the Riverwalk is great. But most of the apartments are small and dark. And that's one of the reasons all the Parisians are out in the cafes. So it's a city that is lovely in the public realm, but kind of cold and dark in the private realm. Now, to take the exact opposite, if you go to North Dallas, where the North Dallas Special is, the McMansions, where they were invented, and you say, God, this is awful. Nothing but parking lots, nothing but traffic jams. But when you enter a McMansion, it's a paradise in there. They're big, they're air-conditioned, they have big space, they have big couches, they have a gym, they have lots of bathrooms. And that's an instance of the private realm being spectacular once you get inside the house, and the public realm being awful. Well, Charleston has an almost perfect balance between exceptionally nice streets, narrow, walkable, tree-lined, and exceptionally nice houses. The Charleston side yard house is an unusual type because it has a very private yard on the side. They have cross ventilation. Of course, the interiors are as nice as you can afford. So I would say that Charleston is my favorite city because it is the best city in balance of private realm and public realm. I have since, I keep that in mind, and most of American suburbia is pretty nice in private and pretty awful in public. And most European cities are terrific in public, in the streets, and when you go to the apartments, you visit somebody, not so nice. So for me, the ideal is the balance, and that's Charleston. Okay, your firm was founded 40 years ago. When you were 30, what advice would you give to a 30-year-old planner now? Well, I could give a lot of advice. One of it is, I think the principal one is, go to a place that isn't already mature, that still needs you. When Liz and I arrived in Miami in 1974-75, Miami was not a place we would have chosen at all. Not enough going on, 2 backwoods. Obviously we would have preferred New York or Boston or San Francisco, but there was no work. It was the recession of 74. There was no work. We came to Miami, and they needed us. Miami actually had need for planners with new ideas. The university needed us. The institutions that had not yet been founded, the museums, the libraries, all these things that are now make Miami so rich had not been founded. So I would say advice to a young planner, go to a place that essentially you would not really want to go to because it's not cool enough, you know? But if you go to a place that's cool enough, it's taken up by people who have already made it cool, and you have much less opportunity. So my advice is find the next city coming up. And that, I would say, are, just as an example, I think the Great Lake cities, the Cincinnatis, the Buffalos, the Clevelands, they have a wonderful urban fabric. There was a lot of disinvestment, but now with climate change and global warming, that echelon of cities up there in the cooler areas, they're going to come back again, and they need you. So I would say go north, you know. Or if you prefer more rural living, find a small town somewhere that has very good bones, and in an area that won't be affected by climate change so much, and go there. They will also need you. And that would be what I would advise. But I would say stick to the profession. It's incredibly interesting. Every day is interesting, and you can do a lot of good with it. The next question: if you could rewrite Suburban Nation today, what would you change or add? Well, Suburban Nation is a book that we wrote 20 years ago, and it was for a planning book, it was a terrific bestseller. It did probably 120,000 copies, which is amazing in a profession that usually sells 5 or 1,500, and that one's going to 110,000. And there was a second edition, and in that second edition, we were asked to rewrite the preface with precisely this in mind. How would you have written it differently? What I remember writing 10 years ago is that we would have taken politics into account more. Already 10 years ago, we realized that everything we uttered, everything we wrote about, actually signaled to the left wing or to the right wing something, you know? And it's what they call dog whistles. Oh, so you love single-family houses? Well, you must be X. Or you're for public transit? Well, you must be Y. You know, everything began to have political implications 10 years ago. So you can imagine now. Now everything is, somebody or other melts down. That's unnecessary. I think that the message of the walkable, diverse community works for all humans. They make sense for young humans and older humans, and poorer humans and richer humans, and right-wing humans and left-wing humans. So the actual artifact, that which we propose, the proposal is universal, but the message has to be framed differently. And what I would do is make that point and say that if I was speaking to a libertarian, what I would say is, look, if we build these kinds of cities, these kinds of towns, first of all, I'd speak of towns rather than cities, small towns, you know. Then I would say this walkability business is a choice that is constrained by the market. The code doesn't allow it. If we were to make it, to level the playing field and allow the building of walkable, diverse towns as easily as we would allow, as is allowed, the building of suburban sprawl, that would level the playing field and it would let the market decide. And that would be a good, I think, right-wing framing. On the other hand, we can say, look, this business of walking and diversity leads to social equity, and it leads to lessened tailpipe emissions, so it affects climate change less, and that's a message that I would give to the left-wing guys. And we're still proposing the same city, the same urbanism, the same ideas, but presented differently. And that's just dipping into it. There are, I would say, half dozen, dozen propositions that make sense for all humans, but need to be presented differently. And eventually you learn how to do it. And now, when you have a mixed audience, that's harder. And it really is difficult. You're always tripping up politically. I hope this era of political battlefields just goes away. Hopefully, it'll make life a lot easier. What has been my biggest aha moment so far? I have to say that I've had a lot of aha moments. It's not a matter of having an aha moment every week. Of course, it depends what you mean by an aha moment. But it just means that you have insight, that you have understanding of something that you didn't understand before. And one of the things, just a little while ago, I was in a discussion with younger people in my firm about what does social equity mean for urbanism. And there were all these ideas floating, all of which I'd heard before. And someone said the ability for a small entrepreneur to open a small business so that they can actually capitalize. Right now, the truth is that a big business, a McDonald's, say, knows how to maneuver through the murk of permitting, knows how to get the loans to do it, knows how to get the zoning. But a small business, let's say an immigrant, they don't know how to do it. And that's a substantial problem of equity. And for me, it was an aha moment because it was so simple and I really hadn't thought about it. It was also terribly important. And I'll tell you, that aha moment was less than 2 hours ago. And if you're open to really listening, particularly to things that you are not something you would have thought of yourself, which is what usually happens when a new idea comes up. You said, somebody comes up with a new idea and you try to kill it immediately because it's not your idea. That's such a terrible aspect of human nature. And I have learned over the years to remain open and to actually bring a new idea to life. A new idea, when it first appears, is very fragile. If you don't bring it to life, if you meet a new idea with silence, it'll die. It really has to be brought to life. You have to help it to life. And if it survives, an idea you would have disagreed with, if it survives, when you bring it to life, guess what? That will be an aha moment. And once I learned that technique of supporting any idea that comes up, even one that makes your teeth hurt when you first hear it, oh my God, not, how could anything be so stupid? No. Give it a chance and you will see that you'll have an aha moment. They're really quite precious. Are you going to encourage or discourage a young architect who wants to be an urban planner? Okay, well, the question is, would I encourage a young person to be an urban planner? I'd say categorically yes. You can have a tremendous effect in making life better for humans, sometimes a lot of humans. But I think what I would recommend is that it's incredibly interesting. And it's one of these professions that doesn't specialize you, as would medicine or law. You basically everything is relevant. There's almost nothing in the paper in the morning when you read it that isn't in some measure relevant to urban planning, because that's where human activity takes place. And so suddenly things that you wouldn't normally be interested in become interesting because they're professionally relevant. So yes, that's the feeling I have with urban planning mostly. It's not, I don't have a feeling that I'm doing a lot of good or that it's terribly exciting. I have the feeling that, damn, this is interesting, And And I also have the feeling, I must say, when somebody else opens their mouth who's specialized in something, damn, you're boring. Is that really all you know? You know? And doctors, for example, I mean, incredibly brilliant doctors, but it's like you just die because it's a small world they inhabit. They do more good than planners, more good for humanity, actually, but they're kind of boring to talk to. And most urban planners, if you're willing to fight and have it out with them, you know, argue the difficult issues, it's terrific. It's a great profession. An architect is, again, specialized. You know, they can do rich people's houses or hospitals or apartment buildings, but until they become planners, they are not. They're not really not that interesting to talk to. Here's one. How is heterodoxy in thinking better than orthodoxy? Now, orthodoxy is when you have learned something and you have learned it very well and it becomes doctrine. You know, this is the way we do things. It's the conventional way. It's the orthodox way. Problem with that is that it becomes dogma. And then you can't slip out of it. So an idea becomes doctrine, and then it becomes dogma. And that's orthodoxy. And you die, because the world changes. Heterodoxy means that you believe many different doctrines. There is a doxy, but there's many doxies. And heterodoxy, you believe many different doctrines, sometimes contradictory, but you have them in your quiver. It means you have many different ways to do things. And you know many different things, and it's absolutely necessary. The world that an urban planner works in, the people they work with, the circumstances, I mean, you might be in a place that is fantastically high crime, and you simply have to know how to deal with that. Now, if you go to another place, as often happens in suburbia, that doesn't have any crime at all, but your orthodoxy says that there will be crime, then you do stupid walled community that's totally unnecessary, breaks everything up, makes everything boring and hostile looking, etc. And that's orthodoxy, you know. You have one way to do it wherever it is. You always apply the same way. Well, heterodoxy it really implies a lot of range in technique, and it makes you much better at what you do, much more agile.